I had the privilege this week of sitting down with Lainne Love and having a beautiful conversation about advocacy and pregnancy. Whether you have been pregnant, plan to become pregnant, or are thinking about another pregnancy, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your menstrual health, offering period solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am so excited to share a conversation today with Lainne Love. Welcome to the show, Lainne.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about being a mama and all of the joys and the privilege of what it means to be a mama and the effects that that has on your heart and your body and your development. So this is really exciting.
So just from that introduction, can you all tell why I have this amazing person on the show today? So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, Lainne.
Well, I am a mom, a proud mama to a little boy, and he's a neurodivergent child. And I am an award-winning coach, and I'm a best-selling author, and I really, really love helping people to birth their bigger missions in this world so that they can leave their legacy of love and be living the life that they dream of having. And I'm so passionate about that because it's been a lifelong journey for me to get there and to really understand the importance of what that is, but also just to accept the journey.
Oh, I love that. Accepting the journey. That is such a big part of it, isn't it?
It was so hard for me. It was so hard. No,
I
I don't want to. I want it now.
I think I'm raising my hand as you're saying that because I too am in that boat as well. And for those who've listened to this show, you know my journey and my story to becoming a practitioner as well. And I feel very much in alignment with what you said about no, I want it now. Like my whole practice was founded on no, I want it now. So I completely get that. So tell us a little bit about your story that brought you to doing the work that you're doing now.
My gosh, it's, like most of our stories, it's so like long and twisty and windy and there was no, you know, straight line A to B. There was lots of pivots and lots of falling down, lots of figuring it out, lots of mistakes, lots of frustrations, lots of success and lots of beautiful things too. I came from a fairly chaotic background. I had a single mom who had 4 kids, and she was just a teenager when she had her first 2 children, which was me and my older brother, and then in her young 20s with my younger brother and sister. And so, as you can imagine, she didn't have the skills, talents, or abilities to provide a safe, nurturing environment for us as children. She did a lot of great things. She finished high school and went to nursing school and worked while she had us. So she had provided a lot of positive examples, but I endured a lot of trauma and abuse as a child. And so that shaped my world tremendously as it does. And I didn't know anything else. So it took me a really long time to figure out, to know what I didn't know. Because how can I know something if I don't know it, if I never experienced it, or if I'm just like this, fish in this bowl of water and I don't know there's an ocean out there because I've never experienced the ocean. And I think a lot of people have that experience, and that led to a lot of frustration for me. It's like, I want these things and I have no idea how to get it or how to relate to it or what that even looks like. And just like constantly hitting myself against a wall is that's what it felt like. And so the journey has been like cracking down that wall and figuring out how to get to the other side, and even also, like, what do I want that's on the other side? Because limitations are something that we all experience, and we all have an idea of different possibilities and limitations when we're trying to dream big for our lives, or maybe we're not even dreaming big because that's the limitation. So the journey has been really humbling and really beautiful and really hard and really worthwhile.
Absolutely. And it makes me think too with how you opened this program with the fact that you're a proud mama. So,
Yeah.
with the journey that you went on to get to where you are now, let's talk about how it feels when you step into being a parent for yourself.
Oh, Lord. Being a parent is like, I can't imagine a greater gift that we have as an opportunity for an experience as a human being. Being a parent is a tremendous opportunity to become the greatest version of yourself possible if you rise to the challenge, because you will be tested at every moment. You will be tested, physically, emotionally, psychologically, I mean, spiritually, all of the ways. And I'm grateful for that because it really cracked me open. And I think the experience of having a child is like your heart grows legs and walks outside of your body. And how do I trust that my heart's going to be safe? And how do I let it go and walk and have its own adventures? And who is this version of me? Oh my God. I've never seen so many aspects of myself. I didn't even know they existed within me until I was a parent, especially the really ugly stuff. Like, I was generally a very positive and easygoing person. And I met this controlling version of myself, this really punitive version of myself, many aspects of myself that needed to be healed so that I could, in essence, stop the cycle, of my ancestry, of my lineage. Each of us have that opportunity when we step into any role within our family to stop patterns, to create new patterns. And that's definitely something that I invested in doing the work in because I did not. As I saw myself reliving those patterns, I also saw that I did not want to relive those patterns. So I heavily invested in stopping that cycle and creating a new opportunity for my family and my lineage.
Oh, beautifully said. Beautifully said. I feel very much the same way. Parenthood has challenged some of my beliefs. It has challenged my patience. It's challenged my communication skills in terms of finding as many ways possible of articulating myself before I start to lose my temper. It's really amazing how becoming a parent really stretches and works those muscles and encourages us to take introspective moments to be like, well, why did I respond that way? And why do I feel that way? And I find myself asking this question a lot, especially as I'm stepping into teenage years with my older children. Your heart is walking around outside of your body. And you just want to protect it and you want to save them from all of the things that hurt you or could hurt them, or you just want to wrap them in bubble wrap, and you absolutely can't, because they have to have experiences that shape who they are, and they have to live. And it's so beautifully said, my friend, because it's hard, and it really does invite you to take a look at that balance in terms of, how far is still safe and yet continues to give them the independence. I'm currently working through that exercise because at the time of this recording, my kids are almost 16, 14, and 12 and a half, and I have a little one on the way. And so it's definitely challenging when they want more independence and you see all of the scary things in the world that could potentially harm them. And I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, who is now 12 and a half, because my family is blended. So I adopted my older children a few years ago and went from being a single parent of 18-month-old to, well, she was almost 2 at the time, to being a parent of children. You grow along with your children. So all of a sudden, I had 2 children who were at a very different developmental age than my own biological child. And I was like, oh, and so I had to grow really fast in order to like meet them in that space that they were in. But I found that my pregnancy journey with my daughter really woke up something inside of me that I didn't even know was there. And that mama bear instinct. I remember the first time it reared its head, and I felt like I needed to stand my ground. And as somebody who really didn't like confrontation, was not somebody who went looking for a fight anywhere, that level of I need to protect my child was so strong and literally came roaring out of me from the depths of my body. And advocacy for myself and for her took on a totally different experience, meaning, feeling. Gosh, there's so many words I could put in there. It was an embodied experience like nothing I had ever experienced before.
I can understand that, all of those shifts that take place just as you're getting ready to become a parent. And there aren't things that you can know until you experience them. But yeah, learning the impact and like the real meaning of the level of responsibility you have in bringing in life to this world. And then you have the opportunity to examine like, wow, what kind of choices am I making and what do I really want, instead of numbly going through our days as we do.
Mhm.
Definitely, I have fallen victim to that, where I don't, spend a lot of time thinking about things because it doesn't really affect me, or I don't think about it because I'm doing something else. And yeah, when you become a parent, then you have to all of a sudden this avalanche of different possibilities and different things that you have to think about that you've never really considered. Like, okay, what do I want from myself and my body? And what do I want this journey to look like? And what do I want my child to come into? And what kind of tools am I going to use to facilitate that journey? And what do hospitals do? And what do midwives do? And what setting do I want? And what does that mean? I mean, it's fun. It's fun. And it's also really, really important, because as we learn what the impact of all of those choices are, not only on our own well being, but on the development of our children when they're coming into the world. I mean, gosh, the amounts of ways, even though I have all of these tools, like the amounts of ways that I have, you know, caused my child to need therapy in the future, regardless of, what it is that we're doing. So, like, I throw that disclaimer in there. Everybody, you're all doing your best. We're all doing our best. And you're not going to do it perfect. And your kids are going to have challenges and you're going to make mistakes and all of those beautiful, wonderful things. But it's how you navigate them. So, to not get too overwhelmed and, oh God, so many
Yeah.
choices, and every little thing that I've done has now had this effect. Yes, it is true. And it's okay. It's okay.
I love that. It's so true. I remember trying to make like I sat down with my midwife. I think I was late 20 weeks, maybe early 30 weeks, but I want to say it was late 20 weeks with my daughter. And she sent me home with a packet of like all kinds of things to read about what epidurals do and what Pitocin does and what they are. Let's just start that. What they
Yeah, what they
actually
are.
are and, potential challenges when using them and all these kinds of things. And it was all done from a well-intentioned place of I want you to be able to make aligned choices for what feels good for you. And I really appreciated that approach. And yet, where I was because of hormones and how close I was to birth, and in my own journey, I made the transfer between care with a traditional OBGYN to the home birth setting when I was about 26 weeks with my daughter, because I didn't even know that I had choices up until that point. It wasn't until I went to a birthing class and the person who was presenting the birthing class was like, well, if you choose to do a home birth, and then she would explain, and if you choose to do a hospital birth, and then she would explain. And she kept going very evenly back and forth between the two. And I was like, "Hold on a second. What do you mean I have another opportunity to birth that doesn't involve a hospital? Are you kidding? Tell me more about this," right? Because everything in my body just totally resonated with the idea of being able to birth in the comfort of my own home. And that isn't for everybody, but for me, it felt very aligned and it felt very comforting. And I loved the idea of being able to labor at home, and I wanted to know all the things about it. Well, fast forward, because I was later on in my gestation when I made that transfer of my care, and that was actually my first mother bear moment, to be quite honest. I was confronted at the front desk by the OBGYN in front of an entire waiting room of people. And they told me to my face I was going to kill my child. And this was a death sentence for me and for my child. And I hadn't felt that defensive mother bear come roaring to the surface until that moment. Number one, I was horribly embarrassed, and there was an audience of people that was witnessing all of this, and that really bothered me. But two, it just I felt so comfortable and at peace with the decision that I had made, and that this person was challenging my body autonomy and sovereignty and what felt aligned to me. And in that moment, like felt Mother Bear roar out of the core of my being for the first time in my life. And I was like, how dare you? Like, this is a decision. Number one, you've now made this into a public display that's totally inappropriate. And number two, this is my choice. Please go get my records and provide them to me. I am not going to have this conversation with you right here. And the more they challenged, the worse it got.
Yes.
So, then I was sitting at home with this packet of paper from my midwife and feeling very overwhelmed. Like you said, like all of these choices, like if I choose this, this could be bad. And so then it became a very cerebral activity, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes that's where it goes, or for a lot of us, that's where it goes because we've been taught that this thing that sits on top of our shoulders is far superior to the wisdom that we hold inside of our body. And we can have all of the data and information in the entire world to make cerebral decisions with, but our body knows like if it feels good or if it doesn't. That little intuitive nudge will tell you long before, like, does this feel good? Nope, that doesn't really feel aligned for me. Like, that will happen before your brain catches up with, I need to make an analytical, linear decision about whether I should do this or not, right? I am totally guilty of this. I'm an Aquarius, folks, for anyone who hasn't caught that on a past episode. I have to think through everything. I want all the data and to make an intelligent decision. And that is part of where I felt like advocating for myself really stepped forward as an expectant mother and as a first time expectant mother, because all of a sudden I was very plugged into my body. And instead of making these decisions from I mean, yes, did I look at research? 100%. But then in my body would be like, yes, this feels good. No, that doesn't. And I was so much more aware of that decision making process being facilitated that way that I stopped. I had to sit down with myself and have a conversation with myself and be like, Adrian, yes, you have a lot of information on the table in front of you, but mothering, there is a big piece of it that biochemically we know what to do and how to do it. And you have to trust that your body knows what to do. It's
Yep.
going to be okay.
Amen to that. Yeah, that's all true. And that's where the examination and that overwhelming feeling can come in. It's because I think we aren't encouraged to think enough. Like, as we're talking about making it a cerebral process, I mean, it can be a part of that. It definitely is more of a like a primal intuitive process to me. But even if we are wanting to use more of our logical mind, it's like even examining that, well, where do these people get the information from, and what's their intent behind that? This is a business, and like, why this information? And well, if I use my intelligence and I look around the world, that's what it was for me. It's like, but wait a minute, like, we've literally been, birthing children since the beginning of humanity. Like, there's a natural element there in which our bodies are definitely capable of doing this process. And has medical intervention and advancement been helpful in saving lives of mother and children? Absolutely. So for me, it was finding that balance. It's like, well, we have like access to emergency care if necessary. But I mean, there's nothing more intelligent than my body. I mean, my body's literally growing this baby. So, I mean, my body then knows how to deliver it into the world. And it's just emotionally and mentally preparing myself to do that. And I could have done a better job at that because I had a home birth as well. A home water birth, and I was like, I've got this. I meditate, I do yoga. I'm like a certified yoga teacher. I know my body. This will be great. And it was. I had a very beautiful, relatively easy delivery, but I wasn't prepared all at the same time. Nothing can, well, I don't know if that's true that nothing can prepare you. I'm sure there are things that can, but going into labor is indescribable. And I was really hoping to have an organ birth because I know that that's possible. It did not happen that way. It was definitely sort of, I did think at one point, like, what if I just drown myself in this pool? At some point, I definitely was looking for a little bit out, but I did not do that. It was interesting, the thoughts that there wasn't a lot of thoughts that went through my mind because you're so present, as you know, you're so present and it's so indescribable and extreme, but you really meet yourself in a way that, well, you'll never meet yourself like that again. It's really a practice of surrender.
Oh, that's the truth. Surrender,
Uh-huh.
yes, at its absolute finest on all of the levels. I remember laying in bed with my daughter gurgling and cooing next to me after I had given birth. I want to say it was maybe 2 or 3 hours after I had delivered her. And, I had delivered the placenta. Everybody was all cleaned up. Baby was weighed. I was, laying in the comfort of a dimly lit room with my daughter and just like soaking her in and feeling how surreal it was to be holding this little person in my arms and that I was a mother now. And I kind of took inventory of my entire body and I was like, well, I have been through as a competitive martial artist, like I've been through some matches, man, and I have never met myself the
And I just
way
got my
that
butt kicked.
yeah, I have never met myself the way that I just did, and it tested the salt that I was made of, like,
Mm.
on so many levels, and I would absolutely do it the same way again, and I plan to do it the same way again,
But I think when we talk about pregnancy and body autonomy and sovereignty, that it's really important to mention the advocacy piece of things and being able to either advocate for yourself or appoint somebody to be your advocate when you're in a position where literally words fail because you are just trying to sleep between contractions and, pace yourself through the entire experience. Is that something that you feel is also really important? I'm going to pause this incredible episode to share an opportunity for you to join me as a reproductive rebel. As you know, I'm a holistic women's health practitioner who practices with a focus in East Asian medicine. I truly am one of a kind in the way that I practice, and that is a part of what makes me a rebel. I am here to disrupt a healthcare model for women and provide natural and effective solutions for all phases in a woman's life. Do you feel called to make a difference in women's health? Whether you are already a practitioner working in this space, wishing to add to your toolkit, or you are just a passionate rebel with a calling to make a difference for others, as I was at the start of my career in this field, the Holistic Women's Health Practitioner Program is open for enrollment. I am looking for passionate, committed, and heart centered people who desire to make a difference in the women's health space and desire to make it a place where women feel seen and heard, where their needs and concerns aren't gaslit, but really taken seriously and met with compassion and education to help them reach their goals. Does this sound like you? If so, please check out the program link in the show notes and schedule a one on one talk with me or join a free information session. Or if you know that without a doubt this is where you want to go, enroll and get started today. Together, we will make a difference for the future of women's healthcare. I can't wait for you to join me.
It was startling to me, the journey and the sharp contrast. And I know it doesn't necessarily always have to be this way, but certainly was my experience when I was going to the doctor versus when I was seeing my midwife, the sharp contrast of judgment that I experienced at the doctor's visits. It was short, it was curt, there was a lot of judgment, especially like going over like my history and my age and my choices, again, home birth. I was surprised by going in and almost every time feeling like I was going into battle. Like, all right, I'm going into my appointment today and I'm going to have to defend myself. Versus when I would go to my midwife, I had like an hour and a half. I was never rushed. And I was always just presented options. And there was a zero judgment. At least that was my experience again. And I'm not saying that it necessarily is always that way. It was just something that I was surprised by noticing that sharp contrast. And I didn't go in preparing myself thinking that I had to, one, defend myself or advocate for myself in ways that I was never anticipating, and how vulnerable that all felt, and how I really felt like I was being bullied or pushed into making certain choices or going into a certain direction. However, I was always sure that no, I really trust that, like, for me, an at-home natural birth is what always felt most authentic to my particular journey and would be most beneficial to me and my child, and I loved being at home thereafter, and, like, I had 5 dear friends that were with me at the birth. They each held like, an aspect of my body, one hand, one hand, one leg, one leg, and then my other dear friend was behind me, holding me, helping me to bring my child into the world, surrounded by loved and loved ones, and thereafter. And we popped a bottle of champagne and passed, champagne around, and everybody got a chance to hold my son, and all of that warmth and togetherness that wouldn't have been a possibility within a hospital setting. And that's not something that I would have thought to think about. Like, how do I want my son to come into the world? How do I want to feel supported thereafter? What do all of those things look like? And so those are fun things if you've never thought about it to think about, is like all of those different elements to the birth process and to your advocacy. What are all of those steps? What do you want them to look like? Who do you want to be surrounded by? Who is going to be there to be your advocate for you if you can't? And if I was doing it again, those are definitely things that I would be thinking about, especially, in the now. I'm really clear about what it is that I want for myself and my body and my journey, and what it is that I want for my child or children.
Those are all such great points because we focus so much on the shower and decorating the nursery and the baby clothes and all of those things, but we don't actually think about the entrance into the world quite often. And I want to also kind of put a pin in the corner of this a little bit that, you know, there are certain high risk situations, right? There's about 3% of birthing people that really do need hospital intervention. And, both of us, and I didn't realize at the outset of this conversation that Lainey and I both had this beautiful home birthing experience. So I think that that's really awesome. But I do want to speak to those who do have to have a hospital setting birth, that there are ways that you can advocate for yourself and you can create a birthing experience that feels aligned. I worked with a client who, because of her age, they were starting to get excited. They, being the traditional model, were getting excited about, well, we need to induce you. And she didn't feel that she needed to be induced. She had a choice between two hospitals that were near to her. One, she had been told by people who had been through that particular hospital that she would have more autonomy in terms of making decisions that felt aligned to her, although the hospital wasn't set up as nicely as the other one that was near her. And she regretted in some ways that she hadn't listened to what felt aligned to her, because she would have ended up choosing differently. So, you can be in a hospital setting and still create, as much as you can, an environment that feels aligned to you. And a lot of times we tend to just roll along with standard operating procedures and don't question them because this is what the doctor is telling us to do. Now, I make this mention because their standard operating procedures are because of malpractice, and because they carry big insurance, and because it's a business and they need to move a certain number of people through a unit in a certain amount of time in order to pay for all of the overhead. Like, birthing is a business.
Yeah.
And when you're in a larger, I'm going to call it a mechanized model like that, where they look at birth a little more in a biomechanistic way rather than in a biointelligent way, you
Mhm.
know, first we administer this, then after a certain amount of time, we administer this, then we do this, right? They have that kind of a formula. And the thing is birth isn't like that. The
Mm.
body, if you just let her do what she knows how to do, and I'm using the she pronoun because we're talking about assigned at birth female, but identity is not part of this conversation, or just talking about the actual physiological part of this. So we have an opportunity to create this environment for ourselves. And it sounds like even though you were under midwifery care, you also had to answer to a doctor. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're, like, going into this a little bit more, because this isn't a conversation about you need to choose this or you need to do that, or if you don't choose this, then you're somehow not enough or you're failing or you're not good or whatever that is. It's just that I don't think that even knowing that this possibility is an option and or that it's actually has so many benefits, like it's not presented and it's not talked about on the day to day, really. It's always, it's your one alternative friend or, or your friend of a friend, or it definitely used to be more that way. And it shouldn't be alternative because we are designed, as I said, like we're designed to be able to give birth. And yes, there are amazing positives and benefits to medical intervention, and the medical intervention has saved lives. And it's also not saved lives. So it's just like looking at both sides of the coin so that when you are going to make your decision, whatever that decision is definitely the right choice for you. You have more information than what you started off with so that you can get to the point where you actually feel like you got to pursue different options and discover like, okay, this is the best one for me. And what I was disappointed in was that, and it's not always like this because I've also had friends that have had really supportive medical doctors and allopathic medical practitioners be supportive, but I was surprised that instead of presenting me with information, like there's this and this, there was a lot of judgment around it. Instead of empowering me to make the choice that felt best for me and how it is that I could make that choice the most safely, I was just met with scorn and judgment. And that's not helpful. And that certainly didn't make me feel like I could instill a lot of trust into them. However, I saw that it was important for me to go to a medical doctor for some certain big checkups just to make sure that everything was progressing. And once I was sure that I was fine, then, I was able to distance myself from that until then my son was born and did all of those checks. But just know that you have choice, know that you have options, and start to research and discover what those possibilities are and have fun. And I love that you talked about, we have these parties to celebrate, but we don't have parties to consider the impact of what this change is bringing into our lives and what all the multiple levels of those changes are. Maybe we should actually be creating the new party.
I like that.
Yeah.
I really do. And something else as you were talking, it made me think to also mention Lainey is in Canada and I am in the United States. And just listening to what we've recorded so far, do you hear the similarities? So, like, I experienced shame, guilt, and being ostracized by my OBGYN when I asked for my records to make this transfer. Lainey had a similar experience where she felt like she had to go into these doctor's appointments and defend the decision that she was making. I found myself defending that decision after I gave birth to my daughter because I had to go back to a provider and be cleared to go back to work. And they were like, "What do you mean you had a home birth? What do you mean you didn't this or didn't that?" And then my provider goes, "What do you mean you didn't have any tearing?" I'm
Me
like,
neither.
that's the magic of a home birth. Like, I wasn't fighting my body, I was working with my body, and my daughter and I were working together to bring her into the world. Like, there was nothing being forced, I wasn't on anyone else's timeline. Now, if I need to be transferred to the hospital, I want a really skilled OBGYN who's gonna meet me with compassion when I get there. But I also don't wanna be forced into a situation, at least this is my personal feeling, I don't wanna be forced into a situation that doesn't feel aligned to me in order to birth my baby because I don't even realize I don't have other options. That's why
Yeah.
I transferred my care halfway through my pregnancy because I didn't even know home birth was an option.
I've
And
heard
then
that a couple of times. And
yeah.
just a disclaimer, I am Canadian, and what I have said definitely applies absolutely to Canada. But I did give birth to my son in California. He was born in the United States.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting because, we're so close geographically and, the culture
Mhm.
is very similar in
Yeah.
terms of how it's communicated, how it's shared. Like, I found that after COVID, there were enough people here in the United States that started going, "Oh, I don't feel safe birthing in a hospital. I want to birth at home." And there was this huge boom in home births becoming more popular, more widely understood and known about. Midwives became a lot more in high demand. And I feel like the stigma has shifted a bit
Yeah.
over the course of the last 4 years, which I think is really beautiful because I got a lot of questions from the traditional model about it. And then there's a whole bunch of questions around vaccinations and all of that. And that's a totally different topic. But essentially, to highlight all of the choices that we as parents make that feel aligned in the care and well being of our children that sometimes align and sometimes are slightly out of alignment with I'm going to call it the traditional narrative, right? Like we
Mhm.
only think we birth in hospitals. We think that we birth from our back. I mean, think about all of the movies that you see on TV. They
Yeah.
tell the birthing person who's screaming their head off, mind you, to bear down and push with their legs in an unnatural birthing
Yeah.
position. And this is the
No wonder they're screaming. No wonder they're
Exactly.
screaming. Oh.
Because with the amount of back labor I had, like, I totally could not have labored in that position. But, these are certain kinds of generalizations that we see in the way that birth is depicted and the stories that are told. And, there are a lot of people who have experienced birth trauma
Yeah.
as a result of being put into circumstances, positions, situations that don't feel aligned to them. Instead of being allowed to trust our body, and that trusting your body isn't a bad thing.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so magical. It's so empowering. I mean, the ripple effect of what it means to step into that level of power and using that word again, sovereignty is something else, that goes back to that mama bear, mama power. Like you are a force and you are a force of nature. You are a force to be reckoned with. And just know that whatever it is that you choose, it's okay. You did the right thing. This is just a possibility. In case you didn't know, you have a lot of different choices. And there are a lot of different things that you're not encouraged to think about that you could think about. Like, how do I want my experience to be? How do I want the after experience to be? What do I want to be doing? Who do I want to get to be there? Those are fun, beautiful things to think about. And know that, yeah, again, whatever you choose is just perfect.
I love that. I think that's a really beautiful note to end this episode on too, because you know what feels good to you. And I think the things to advocate for, and I hope that you take out of this podcast and our stories, is that your body knows what feels good. If that means laboring naturally in a hospital setting because you're close enough for intervention, God forbid, but that gives you a sense of ease in your system to trust your body to do what it needs to do, then that's exactly where you should be. Just know that you have options and that what is offered to you as a boilerplate set of interventions and procedures are things that you can question. You legally can advocate for yourself and your child and say, yes, I want this, and no, I don't want that. And they might badger you a couple of times about it, but you do have the right of refusal. And whatever you envision your birthing experience to be, making sure to put effort at least as much effort as you do into designing the nursery,
Yes.
into really sitting and feeling into what feels like the way that you want to welcome your child into the world. And also, I did an episode a few weeks ago about the postpartum travesty, right?
Mm.
That we don't put as much effort or emphasis into figuring out how we're going to be loved and cared for after the birth. You
Yeah.
know, these aspects are equally, if not more so important than making sure that, you have a mobile above the baby's crib. Like, yes,
More important.
I
More
think
important than
I
that.
think it's more
That's
important.
that's way more important. And yeah, why don't we? I really think this is a great opportunity for you to create those things,
Mhm.
create those checklists, create that new ceremony, ritual and ceremony, and not as thinking about those things and making a plan with your community and your people. And this is what I would like it to look like. And that sounds gorgeous. That sounds beautiful. That sounds like next level. I love it.
And those are all the things that I'm so excited to be able to do this time, because the first time I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And even though I had made that choice to be a home birthing body, I had no idea what I was going to face in the postpartum. And I wish I had had more information, and that's why I do podcasts like this with beautiful people like you to talk about these topics, because I want people to know that they have choices and that there are aspects of their care and healing that really are sacred and, like you
Yeah.
said, ceremonial.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why we're seeing an increase in postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety and issues healing after birth and all of these things is because there isn't enough care paid to the fact that your body just spent 9 to 10 months building a small human, and
Mhm.
it's going to take at least that long for you to recover. And that's okay, and that is normal, and it means that you have to have certain things in place because your body will not be exactly what it was pre-pregnancy as soon as you deliver your child.
No, at least it wasn't for me.
It wasn't for me either. And that's one of the things that I really regretted. I had a beautiful home birthing experience with my daughter, and I wouldn't change any aspect of that for a second. But I really wish I had known more and done more in the postpartum, and I had advocated more for what I needed in my healing process afterwards, because it really did change the way my body showed up. Because postpartum is one of the opportunities for female bodies to hit a reset button on their health. And it's so important to be able to take care of yourself during the time frame. And it really does start with the birthing experience
Yeah.
and everything that follows after that. And so I'm really looking forward to leaning into all of the ceremony around this little guy's coming into the world and
Beautiful.
the healing afterwards, because we deserve that. We used to do this in villages and communities and multi-generational family units that used to look after one another. And so, like you said, this is an opportunity for a new paradigm. How are we going to re-envision this going into the future? Because we don't live in these multi-generational family units anymore, but it doesn't mean we can't create that same kind of experience.
Exactly. So I look forward to hearing what everybody's feedback is on that and what it is they're going to be creating and what ideas like moving forward they want to start integrating and looking at some old traditions. Like there is that tradition of 30 days where you don't leave your home with your baby, you don't see anybody, it's just you and your baby or you and your husband and your baby, who's ever just in your home, and you just bond and you nurture each other before you set out into the world and are introduced to your extended family. And I think that's really, really beautiful. But
Mhm.
just as an example of the many possibilities that you can create with your family.
Absolutely. Well, this is an amazing moment in time where we are starting to see a shift
Yeah.
in the birthing experience and the narrative around birth and birthing bodies. And so I really feel like this conversation is just so timely. So thank you so much for joining me today, Lainey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about being a mama. I love talking about ceremony and ritual and like self advocacy, all these amazing things that happen, that fierce side of you that gets birthed or reinvigorated when you become a mom. So thank you so much for having me. And congratulations to you, mama, and your new
Thank you.
baby.
Thank you. I'm so excited to welcome him into the world. That is for sure. So, if you've loved this conversation, please chime in. Let us know that you've loved this conversation. And how can people find you, Lainey?
So easy. I'm really lucky. It's just Lainne.com, Lainne.com. You can find me and you can book a call. Or you can just read some information. You can find me also on Instagram at Lainne Love. I'm so easy to find.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your experience and wisdom with our listeners. And it sounds like we might have to do this again.
Yes. Yes, please.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.